Hello there. Today I have a really good guest here, Jimmy Angelakos. He's a PostgreSQL expert, and we're going to be talking to him about multiple topics. In particular, we're going to start with his new book, PostgreSQL Mistakes and How to Avoid Them. Welcome, Jimmy. We're honored to have you here on stage.
Thank you very much for your invitation.
Oh, you're more than welcome. We're always wanting to have experts like yourself and get all your opinions and thoughts behind the process of your brilliant minds and inspirational books, thoughts, methodologies, and experience.
I don't consider myself inspirational in any way, but I try to be useful.
Oh, you definitely are. You have your newest book, and you've had multiple other contributions to the PostgreSQL community, which you've been for quite some time.
Yeah. Community is quite important to me. It is basically how I became an expert, is all about the community. It's the knowledge sharing, the mentoring, the blog posts, the mailing lists. These are all things that teach you, and they're essentially for free. People are giving out knowledge, advice, sharing stories, use cases. And the community has just been so incredibly supportive to me. And I'm really grateful. And whenever I can, I try to give a little bit back by a blog post here and there, a talk at a conference, whatever I can.
And curious, how did you start with all these contributions?
Right. So I've always been a big fan of open source and free software and the whole mentality that comes with it that encompasses the advancement of computer science and software development because you can see how something is written, you can offer suggestions, you can improve it yourself. And also a very often overlooked part of it, which is that free doesn't mean free as in money, right? It means you're free to do whatever you want with it, including sell it. So it doesn't rule out the commercial aspect at all. And um, through my interaction with the local Linux user group, uh, where I was living in Athens, Greece, I came in contact with Linux. Later on at the university, we had further exposure to Unix and Linux, and I came to love all of the openness and tools and general availability of software. So I really appreciated open source for a long time and have tried to contribute in my own small way. Now, Postgres specifically, a friend of mine put me onto Postgres back when MySQL was the biggest thing in open source databases. And I was like, what is this Postgres thing? Isn't it just something that scientists use, or I don't know what its use is? And they explained to me that it was a general purpose database that could do a lot of things, and it could do a lot of things better than most other databases out there. This was around 15, 16 years ago. And I've never looked back since. It's the only database that I've been using for my day-to-day things, for work, professional settings, wherever.
Well, it certainly paid off. I could tell that much. You're well known in the community. You contribute a lot. You speak at conferences. And what are your thoughts on that? Others who are trying to join the community or be part of this exclusive, well, large community. Probably that's the right word.
I'd say the community is a good starting spot. If you want to get involved, and whether it's, for your own reasons or whether it's you wanting to have a career as a database expert or a Postgres expert specifically, I'd say the first thing you should do is get in touch with the community. Come to a conference. If you cannot come in person, try to find virtual events, virtual meetups. Speak to other people, find out what they're doing, with the software you're interested in. It might not even be Postgres, right? It might be anything. Just interact with other people, see how they use it, learn from their experience. For me, I'm going to say this again, use cases are very important. When I hear that someone has successfully used something to do something in the real world, that matters a lot. And for me personally, it's a huge win and personal satisfaction when I see something I've worked on get used in the real world out there, right? Because it's easy to forget when you're behind the screen and you're typing all the time and writing code and writing SQL commands and whatever. It's easy to forget that everything we're doing is because it has an impact in the real world. Someone needs something. Someone needs a database to do something or the software to do something.
Makes sense. And that's usually one of the things because a lot of books out there just talk about topics with no real examples. And that's one of the things I like about your book, that it has the mistakes and how to avoid them. It's real world case scenarios
Right.
and how to apply them. That's unusual to find nowadays, which is great.
Yeah.
Really great.
So the impetus for writing something like this was there's this famous in the Postgres community, a famous wiki page called Don't Do This. And this page has snippets of wisdom in it, like uh, don't use SQL ASCII as the encoding. And it explains in a couple of lines why you shouldn't. So I wrote a talk and presented it at a couple of conferences, and it had a really good reception. And I thought, this is something interesting. Not many people tell you what to do, but not many people tell you what not to do, right? And I think this is a real, I wouldn't call it a problem, but it's a source of confusion on the internet right now. There's a million blogs and a million blog posts and tutorials and pages that have been scraped, either using legal means or illegal means from publications and websites that give you all these conflicting instructions on how to do stuff. And there's also blog posts that, don't get me wrong, blog posts are very useful and they're a useful learning tool, but you should not base your any real expectations on finding the correct answer, looking through Stack Overflow and blog posts, because they're usually someone's story. Some person was trying to do something and they found a way to do it, right? So they describe the way that they solved their particular problem. And it's often easy to generalize and say, this is how you do this. Whereas the intention of the person writing the blog post was, this is how I did this specific thing. Let me give you an example. Partitioning of large tables, right? Most blog posts should go, I had this issue with partitioning, and this is how I partitioned my tables. Instead, some change the title to how to do partitioning in Postgres, right? And then inevitably, someone has a different use case or a different problem, slightly different problem, and this solution doesn't work for them. And that leads to disappointment, and it leads to either of two things. Either Postgres doesn't work, or these instructions don't work, right? And it's unfair on both fronts. So to circle back to what I was originally trying to say, this book is meant to be a source of things that have gone wrong that I've seen in the industry with Postgres use. And I'm trying to describe what people were doing, what they were trying to do, how they made the mistake, why it is a mistake, and what you should do instead. So it's not a how-to, it's a reverse how-to.
Well, that's a
It's
definitely welcome angle. There's that's a very new angle from this point of view.
Yeah, because if you tell someone do this, then what if it's not exactly what they were trying to do, or you didn't cover all cases? And fair enough, nobody can cover everything. They're just writing about the thing they achieved or they were trying to achieve. Whereas when something is an observation of the wrong way to do something, you then let me rephrase that. When you start to say, this is how to do so and so, do steps one, two, three, four, you don't have any real reason to explain why this works. Not many people take the time to explain why it works because it just works. They tried it and it works. Whereas if you say this didn't work, you cannot just leave it at that. You cannot say, oh, and this doesn't work, so don't do it. You have to say why it doesn't work. And this is what gives me, in the pages of my book, the opportunity to stray into the very technical explanation sometimes of why something is wrong and why it doesn't work, why Postgres doesn't like it.
Well, that's a novel approach. Haven't seen that in a big while. And not many also have the knowledge to go in that depth. And that's where you come in. Your expertise comes in because very few people can go back and take all these steps back and say, this is why it works. And this is why it could work for you. And this is why it worked in this case scenario, which is
In
very valid
hindsight,
to what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah, hindsight is 2020. When you've made the mistake or you've seen someone else make a mistake, oh, you make a mental note or you write it down, and then you remember it the next time you encounter these circumstances.
That's that's very true and very helpful because you don't find that every day in books or even in consulting scenarios. Very few can go and take that step back and quite a few step backs and explain it from ground up.
Yeah. And I'm grateful to the publisher as well. The book is out on Manning Publications that reached out to me when they saw that I was doing talks like Don't Do This. And they said, is this something you would write a book on? And I said, sure. Yeah, let me think about it and I'll get back to you.
Well, that resulted in a great outcome there. And it also has a very nice cover too. I looked at it and it's very elegant cover.
Yeah, they really try. They have an interesting approach to book covers, and I like their style.
They're a great publishing company. There's before in the early 2000s, there were many publishing companies, but quite a few have survived throughout the years. And
Yeah,
Manning
very
is
supportive.
definitely a good one.
They've been very supportive.
That's great. They have good books out there too, and yours being one of the top one there. And you also shared on LinkedIn that it's on the top list of books out there in popularity, I think. Or
Yeah, it so happened that I was number four. Well, not
wow,
me. My book was number four in sales for the previous week, and I was really excited to hear that. It was the only Postgres book on the list. There is lots of AI and large language models and Chat GPT on the list. So I think that shows you how invested the industry and the community is in AI.
well, there's a lot of competition. Everything is AI right now too, but the other angle of it is you can't be creating something on top of something you don't understand. Well, in this case, you already gave a good ground up basis for it. And
Right.
then
Yeah.
the next can come in. But yeah, definitely AI is a hot topic nowadays. And you definitely stood up against a competition there. That's a pretty tough competition. AI and LLMs and ChatGPT for to be the fourth, that's amazing.
I think I also saw Elixir on the list.
Oh,
Seems to be rising in popularity. Um, but here's the thing, right? AI does not live in a vacuum. Um, it is built using standard tools. You have databases that hold the data you want to analyze, or JSON files or documents. And you use programming languages to extract this knowledge and to run your mathematical analysis on the data. So really, you can just be talking about the models themselves, or you can take a step back and look at the actual technology and how this all works underneath the covers. I think that's also interesting.
Sure, because after all, it's a merging of data and analytics, which you can't have any analytics without the data in this case. You can have that technology, but without the data, it really makes it hard to make something useful out of it, any predictions or analyze. And it's all about data, Last 2 decades have been data intensive. It's been growing more and more storage,
It is.
databases. And that's exciting. It's an exciting time. We have all these IoTs, wearables, our washers, dryers generating data
Yeah, all
being
the time.
every second.
Your phone generates a ton of data and sends it God knows where,
Yeah.
right? And there's all these people that look at this data and analyze it in order to improve services, improve their sales, um, create models that predict behavior. Um, they turn them into bots that can answer you on websites and so on. Right. There's all these things going on with data, and I think we're seeing a merging of the two disciplines. There used to be data engineers and software engineers. Uh, data analysts and software engineers. Now we're seeing data engineers. Right. We're seeing people that have the technical know-how, but they also become data experts or domain experts in the data that they're collecting and analyzing. That's a really interesting merging of the two worlds.
There's even the other day I was looking at a possible leading career there of prompt engineering, which is just getting to going to what you're saying, just resources that analyze how to get that data correctly or useful out of the LLMs and the data itself, which it's curious to see where that's going to end.
hmm And it's been around for a long time, right? How many years did it take you to learn how to properly Google for things? What works and what doesn't work?
It's still going, every day we struggle with how to Google things. And then now we have with LLMs. So
Right.
eventually you master them, then that technology becomes obsolete and a new one emerges.
Right. I think I saw a social media post by a friend of mine that read, who Googles anymore? I just chat GPT anything I want to learn. Right? They type the question in chat GPT or whatever other tool they want to use, and it gives them a human readable answer instead of a list of results. So I think that's a more natural way to interact that many people appreciate.
It might actually be the SQL killer. We've been hearing for years, oh, this is the killer to SQL. You don't have to learn T-SQL anymore, SQL anymore. This one might actually be close enough just to get those answers out of it. People might not need to learn SQL, but I'm not entirely sure we're there yet. We're getting closer. I can tell that much, but I'm not sure we're at that placement there yet. What are your thoughts on that?
My take on this is that AI is not out to put anyone out of a job, right? I don't think that AI can or will or should replace software developers or data analysts. I think you do still need the expertise to know exactly what you're asking for. And don't get me wrong, it can give you wrong answers, right? Because right now, a large language model doesn't know right from wrong. It can even hallucinate wrong answers that are perfectly understandable English, right? But they're wrong. And I have an example like that in my book where I ask it to write a SQL query based on what I want to do. And it gets some parts of it wrong because it doesn't understand the nuances of SQL syntax.
Yeah, they're learning, but yeah, as you said, eventually they can't get everything right. Well,
Yeah.
in its
But I think
defense,
they have, sorry, go ahead.
in its defense, even we humans don't get it right a lot of times too. So
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think that the main usefulness of these AI platforms right now is from the perspective of an IT professional, let's say, okay? They're that they can help automate a lot of boring or time consuming tasks. Like the example you mentioned, if you're not an SQL expert and you want to find a way to query a database, then you can just ask for it to do it. You can ask the model to do it for you. It might not give you a perfect answer, but it will give you a starting point.
yeah, and you build upon it, and eventually they'll get better. We've been hearing the demise of the developer for years with a low code.
Yeah.
That was one of the latest attempts, but we're still here. We're still coding.
The big question is it's a tool, right? Does it save you time? Does it save you effort? Then it's useful.
And we'll have to merge them. Eventually, it'll be a merge of both expertise, putting it that way. Like you said, it's a tool that we can leverage. It's not the end all be all tool, but we do get one step further into improving our skills. It'll create other new professions, other new skills, other new types of titles. And then we'll start all over again. It's always a new iteration of things.
Definitely. Yeah. Prompt engineering is a interesting problem now that you mentioned it. It's not only about knowing how to ask, it's knowing how to ask the right question for the answer you want to get, right? So it's the same as human interaction in a way, right? If
True.
if you want to learn something, you don't walk up to Doug and you say, "Tell me about Postgres," right? You ask for something specific, right? And I think it's the same way with prompts. I think you have to be really specific, but not in a way that paints you into a corner.
And you have to organize it, be, as you mentioned, tell specifications. For instance, tell me about Postgres from a specific view of a database administrator or a developer, and give me some concepts and why would I use it, why not. That whole changes the entire equation in the output itself, as versus just tell me about Postgres.
Yeah,
Most humans will be asking, okay, what about Postgres? What do you want to know about Postgres?
yeah,
And it's about the same interaction.
sure. And also, you have to understand that you're not speaking to a person, right? You are manipulating through the prompt a model that can give you um, output, let's say. And the nature of that output is quite impressive. I think the language capabilities are really impressive. So I think they've got the interaction down just fine. I think their remaining problem is the accuracy and correctness and the ability to encode knowledge, right? So right now, because we're not talking about machine learning in general, right? We're talking about large language models and specifically. I think the um, sorry,
No
the
worries.
large I lost my train of thought there. Um, I was saying that large language models specifically do this thing. They extract knowledge from sources, and that is also a source of contention, right? What if these sources are copyrighted and the LLM just spits out some copyrighted text? That is still in a legal gray area.
Oh,
But
yeah, you could
yeah,
even take it a step further. And what if the source of the data is wrong? Then your output is going to be wrong.
yeah, exactly. So the thing is, how do you encode knowledge? Right now, the only knowledge these models encode is what they've extracted from somewhere else because they've been trained on human language and sentences and what probably the mathematical model encodes in some way what the sentences mean, but I don't think they can tell wrong from right.
Oh, in fact, even if we use it just for translation, you type in to translate from one language to the other, it's for the most part 80% correct. But a lot of times the syntax, the grammatics are not there entirely.
Yeah.
And many who know the languages will tell you this is close, but not there.
Yeah, it's. I think that's down to the nature of the technique. I think most LLM makers go to great lengths to stress that they're not Markov chain models, right? So they're not guaranteed to produce correct language, even.
Yes. And it's a great advance and it's a great tool. Goes back to what you mentioned. It's a great tool that can help you in many ways, but it's not foolproof.
Right. So back to the topic of databases, right? I think it's fine to ask a prompt and say, I've got this data set here, and I want to find out how many so and so exist in this data set. And it will attempt to solve it in any number of languages you ask it to, right? And if you say, give me an R program that does it, or give me a SQL query, I think it will have a fair go at it. It might not be correct, but it will give you a starting point, definitely. What do you do when something is really nuanced and really complex, though, is the question, right? So I used to get customers because I used to do database consulting. I still do to some extent. And they would ask for really specific stuff, right? We have this algorithm that takes this query to calculate things from the sales of the past 2 months and forecasting from data that we collected from elsewhere in the market. And they had a query that was like 1,200 lines long.
Wow.
I think
That's a
that's
lot.
beyond the current capabilities of anyone to explain in a few lines of text.
Yeah, I don't think it's that easy for an LLM to just pick it up like that, much less generate it. It'll take a good shot at it, but I don't think it'll do the joins. And when you start adding specifics of time constraints, it'll lose its mind.
Right. And there comes a point where where people start calling you an expert, and it's because this sort of thing comes as second nature to you. When someone says, I've got these tables here, and one of them is customers and the other one is sales, how do I find out uh, what category of people bought the most items, right? And as a database guy, you start thinking, you need to do a join, you need to do an aggregate, you need to do a so and so. And I think this intuition that comes through experience and nothing else is really hard to replicate.
Oh, definitely. They don't have where to get that experience from. At least not yet. They can mimic it probably eventually, which I'm sure somebody will think about some possible way, but I don't think it's the, I don't see that happen anytime soon.
Yeah. One of the phrases that I put in the introduction to my book is that no one is an island, right? Nobody is out there alone. And you cannot progress and grow, I think, if you go at everything alone. You need to interact. And this is why I brought up the community earlier, the community aspect. it's really important to go out there and interact with people. I know we computer people are not the best at human interaction usually, but um, I found it useful to force myself to say hi at conferences to people that I was not familiar with, because it's easy to just say go say hi to your friends and acquaintances. But when you're in the hallway of a conference, uh, then there's lots of faces that you don't recognize. Go and speak to one of them and find out what they're doing. You're
Well,
going to
that's great
have some
advice.
interests in common, definitely. And if you don't have any interests in common, then it's still a win because you find out what other people are doing that you hadn't even thought about.
That's a great piece of advice. You'll network. Pretty much goes back to networking.
Sure. And it's not just, networking for the sake of it, just, to make someone's acquaintance so that you can, phone them down the line. It is also uh, a way to gain insights into what the industry is doing, what other people are doing, what techniques exist, um, what people are interested in general. Because in IT, it's really easy to get into a rabbit hole of only the thing you're trying to achieve and not look around you to see what everyone else is doing.
Very true. Uh, most, as you mentioned before, most of IT people put a blindfold and want to focus on certain thing, and in social interactions can be sometimes difficult. One gets
True,
boxed in into just sitting in front of the computer and not being disturbed there.
true. This is what my partner asks me. Uh, it's like, okay, you're in a conference, you do Postgres all day, and then you go out for a beer and you talk about Postgres again.
It happens. It happens. It expands into a more fluid conversation, I guess.
It is, but I think, especially with the past few years that have been really difficult from a social aspect, with everyone being isolated for a while and there being no real world events that you could go to in person for a number of years. I think it's become really clear uh, how important it is to form these human connections and to start interacting with people and not see them as just data points or I can learn this from this person and so on. It's really important to start um, forming meaningful relationships with people that extend beyond just liking a post on social media and reblogging something. I think we all stand to gain from this increased awareness of, people are uh, persons and they matter in a sense that is not strictly numerical. And I don't know, it's just the feeling that I've been getting from these past few years that up to this point, everyone was looking at how many likes do I get on Facebook? How many likes do I get on my TikTok posts or whatever? But I think after all the people went away and you couldn't interact with anyone, that got old real quick. I think people got tired of social media when it was the only thing they had. I don't know if you agree.
No, I completely agree. I think it's more of the social aspect, almost to the point of quantity, quality takes over quantity, because social
Mm,
media, because of the data points that you mentioned, liking, reposting. But when you take that away, the social aspect becomes such important. We were confined for 2 years plus or minus, depending on how you look at it, wherever you were in the world. We're human. We need some interaction, whether it's high interaction or low, but we need interaction to some level. And that translated to the quality of your connections too. Even if it's just like right now, we're connecting, we're talking through the video, but it's not still the same as going, taking a beer or a meal and sitting and talking, being ambiance, the ability to talk and communicate and see that there's some distance between us there, that you're there, feeling that presence, you know. It's great that we have all tech that enabled us to still achieve similar, but it's not the same.
No, it's not. I think with the advent of Zoom meetings and all that for work specifically, I don't think you can hold someone's attention span to a screen for more than 45 minutes or an hour, realistically speaking.
Even in conferences, 45 minutes is kind of pushing it, you know. The
Right. And
30 minutes.
I've been invited to 4 hour analysis calls, like what went wrong and postmortems. You simply can't work like that. And I think whereas some companies are forcing, now I'm straying into a different topic, but some companies are forcing people to go back to the office for the wrong reasons. I think they want to see the offices full and utilized, let's say, if they own them. But for me, what I'm getting from working with people in an office is the ability to, as you say, have more direct contact, pick up a marker and start writing on a whiteboard. A physical whiteboard is really important. I really miss that thing.
Yeah. It's that feeling of you just writing and being on the stage pretty much.
Right. And the ability to say, let's take five and come back. That's a thing I try to do online as well. Um, I used to do online training. I would talk to people about Postgres and other adjacent products. And I would find that we needed to take a break after 45 minutes to an hour. You need to stop. You need to say, okay, let's everyone take a break for 10 minutes and we can continue after that. Because online is not as easy as being present. It is somehow less than present in the moment.
It's hard to keep someone engaged online versus in person. Completely agree. It's really hard. One thing is having a person close to you. Many other aspects come to it. The aspect of being polite first and trying to be engaging. But whenever you're not there, it's hard to keep that person engaged.
Yeah. And there are also other social pressures that people get with online meetings, like some groups, I won't say companies, I will just say groups of people, um, insist on turning on camera, and other people are not comfortable with that. Or some people stay on mute and do something else during meetings, right?
Well,
We've all seen that happen, or heard, rather.
it happens. It's just goes back to the engaging. A lot of meetings, I think we're still, even when we were back in the in person, 4 hour meetings don't cut. 2 hour, 3 hour, neither. Even an hour. And let's even table the fact that it's the length of the meeting, but the purpose. Can you do it in 15 minutes? Can you do it through an email? I'm sure you've seen through blog posting and everything saying, well, I jumped on a meeting again that could have been done with an email. How many times does that happen?
Right. Do you have something important to say? Does the meeting need me? Do I need to attend because I want to find out something? These are all things that factor in. And this is why uh, workplace scheduled meetings, like recurring meetings, are bad for me. It's like, what's the purpose of having an engineers meeting twice a week where all the engineers get together and what do they do? Is there a point? Is there a presentation to be made? Who knows?
Yeah, and a lot of times it becomes a recurring staple. It Everybody attends, and there's no point for the meeting. At some time you got to
Uh,
say, okay, we don't have anything to talk about, so okay, let's call it quits and get your time back.
yeah, so it's really important to think of what everyone is going to get from a meeting or even an email, right? Before you send out whatever you need to, uh, because everyone's time is important, and you don't want to be doing something just for the sake of doing it because then it just becomes a ritual and it's mostly useless.
And it happens more often than we want to admit it, honestly. It goes back to the being in the office, wrong reasons. The same as having a meeting that could have been an email. There has to be a reason for it. Not because, at least in my opinion, yeah, some people made some mistake, made a lease that shouldn't have happened, but it's not the employee's fault. They shouldn't be the ones who have to pay the price to have to go to an office because somebody made that mistake.
Right. And you have to consider the fact that not everyone is the same, right? There are people that are less comfortable with social interaction, and forcing them to be in environments where they have to interact socially with other people might not be the best thing for them.
Yes, we
Um,
still have the stigma of we're still not at certain times. I still find myself, and I have to admit that when you see a lot of people pre-COVID, you were used to it, but now you see that it causes you a little bit of discomfort sometimes. We still have that
that
stigma
too,
and
yeah.
that PTSD of COVID. There's to see people like, oh wow, there's a large amount of people. It's
Right.
still there.
I think one of the things that has been really detrimental to IT has been the open plan office. Um, I think it's really, for me specifically, right? I dislike it because I find it very distracting when you're trying to concentrate and people are just moving back and forth and talking among themselves, other people playing their music, whatever. Uh, Even if they try to be as respectful as possible, it is still a distraction for someone who can't deal with this amount of activity around them.
It is, and that's one other thing that's not taken into account whenever the return to office at all. It's very distracting. It's hard to get done, or the what they call the water cooler talk. You just want to go this grab some water or coffee or something, and next thing you know, you spend 30 minutes there, just standing or engaged in something that probably wasn't something you were interested in. It happens, and not for the right reason, unfortunately. A lot of good topics, Jimmy, and we're really happy to have you on this podcast here. And wondering if you have any other topics that you would like to enlighten us about.
We did really cover a lot of ground here on a range of topics. I'd like to spend some time talking about conferences again. There's a lot of really great conferences happening. I'm going to be speaking at the Southern California Linux Expo in about 2 weeks' time from when we're recording this. It's in Pasadena. It's called Scale. It's been happening for 21 years. This is the 21st installment. This is amazing. And I'm very glad to be going for the first time. It has all sorts of talks, people talking about Linux. There's grizzled Unix types. There's fresh faced students. Uh, uh, there's people working on stuff. There's people not working on stuff, but working on the community. It's going to be a really interesting conference.
Oh, it's definitely Scale's a great conference. I've had the chance to attend last year and present. Unfortunately, this year schedule didn't allow so, but I'm glad that you're going, and I'm excited to see it online and uh, have you present there. I'm sure you're going to enlighten and bring a lot of good knowledge to everyone who attends there.
Yeah, it is. It is. The talk is about knowledge sharing a bit, but it's more a fun story. It's a
Oh,
story of a company that didn't have a backup and lost all their data and needed to get their data back.
oh, that's exciting. Bad day for other people, but I'm glad it's not us.
Well, I was involved with it, so I had a couple of bad days, but in the end, it all turned out right.
Oh, great. That's always good and reassuring to hear. Any other parting words, piece of advice, Jimmy, that you might want to let us know about?
No, I'm not really you know, I'm not really fond of dispensing advice because it sounds like I know what I'm doing or know what I'm saying, whereas I'm just sharing my viewpoint, really. I think we touched on a lot of interesting topics, and I'm really grateful for your invitation on this podcast. And if it triggered anything in anyone to go out and interact with people and the community and try out Postgres, then that's all I can hope for.
Well, I'm sure it'll triggered a lot of interesting thoughts and minds there. And hopefully we'll be able to have you again join us and talk about other interesting topics as well, Postgres and many others as well. So we thank you for being such a gracious and spectacular guest here on our podcast. And we're looking forward to many more with you.
Anytime, I'll be glad to.
Thank you. Well, we'll talk soon then. Have a good one.
Cheers. Bye bye.